All right, teammates, we are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the #1 show on innovative teamwork. Great to have you. Looking forward to having you back for more. To my regular listeners, you already know what goes down when you hit that play button. You get nothing but gems, nothing but people who are here, been sent on this earth to help you. Today, I have a guy named Robert White, who as I was getting prepared, Robert, for this show, I kind of want to call you one of the pioneers towards self-development and workshops and doing seminars and business development and things like that, because you were one of the first people that really started it and expanded it, not just in the US, but was able to expand it in other countries as well. So there's a lot of ground we have to cover because, as you guys know, this is what I'm all about when it comes to workshops, keynotes, and giving you business owners just a little bit of something that's going to help your organization run a little more efficiently as a team. So all that being said, Robert, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great, and it's wonderful to be with you.
Yes, and like I said, I could have made that intro very, very long because you have a slew of things that you've accomplished in your life. And people can look you up now and they could think that, hey, you have made it, you're successful. I believe you retired at age 46, but I want to take you back to the beginning because I heard you say on a previous show that growing up, one of your main motivating factors was just getting out of the situation that you were in. So, for someone to actually say that, I want to hear a little bit more. I want to at least give you the opportunity to speak a little bit about your background, your upbringing, and what made things so difficult, what made things so tough that made it so you obviously develop your thick skin now, but what made it so you really wanted to just get out and start something new?
Well, I'm going to do something I learned in Asia. I've lived abroad for 23 years of my working life, and one of the things you learn is that humor doesn't translate very well,
Mm-hmm.
and what you learn to do is give the punchline first.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
tell people that you're telling them a joke, and then they'll laugh.
Right.
It sounds kind of awkward. It actually works out quite well.
It does.
And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
my punchline is that the work I do today in bringing people together is around purpose.
yeah. Uh-huh.
And in your introduction, you talked about my beginning. And one of the things I've realized is I've had several different purposes driving my life over the years. And the first one was I will never be poor again. But
Mm.
we were jumping from one rented place to another because of being evicted.
Right.
We
And this is in Wisconsin, correct?
that was originally in West Virginia.
West
So
Virginia, right?
I'm a mountaineer. Uh,
Mountaineer. All right. Morgan. I grew up in Maryland. I know about that. I know about WVU.
anyway, we did end up in Green Bay, Wisconsin,
Mm-hmm.
a famous football town,
Mm-hmm.
and I have to say the town kind of took care of me. Fortunately, it was a
Right.
blessing. But in terms of my home life, my father was an alcoholic uh, who never spoke with me. Well, he spoke with me one time in the 14 years we were both alive together.
Oh my.
We only had one conversation, and you talk to therapists and people like that, and they almost don't believe it, but it's true. My
Hmm.
mother was a very angry, violent woman who had a lot of children and didn't like kids. So that was my atmosphere. And, I'm one of, I think a lot of younger people don't know about this, but back in those days, if you were buying sugar or flour or any of those kind of grains or commodities,
Right.
uh, they came in cloth bags. And then the advertisers caught onto that and started printing kind of fancy patterns on the cloth bags. So
Mm-hmm.
my first 2 years in school, I went to school in shirts made from flour sacks
Wow.
and, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of stories about how what's the old line?
Mm-hmm.
The money ran out before the month ran out.
Mm.
Uh, I still have trouble eating field greens, kale and dandelion and things like that,
Mm.
uh, because we would be near the end of the month. We would be sent out to pick field greens to be combined with fatback and some of the worst tasting food you ever had, and
Oh my
that's all
God.
we had to eat. That kind of thing. And I
Right.
made a decision very early
Hmm.
that I'll never be poor again,
Right.
and which short term worked for me and brought a lot of success. Um, so anyway, that's the background story. It wasn't very pleasant, but on
Right.
the other hand, I lived in a place that was kind, and a lot of people around me were kind.
Hmm.
Uh, and one of the things that happened was that uh, I did everything. I shoveled snow in the winter. I cut grass in the summer.
Hmm.
I scraped gum off the sidewalk at the local Dairy Queen. That was the worst job of ever. Uh,
Yeah.
I just did. Oh, I sold magazine subscriptions and greeting cards door to door. I had a
Yeah.
paper route, of course.
Yeah.
I did all those things, so I actually already always had a little money,
Yeah.
and my mother would go through my pockets and take it from me. So I also got very good at hiding the money, but along the way, I wrote something, a class assignment when I was 12 years old that won a citywide contest for this essay.
Hmm.
And number one prize was a bicycle with all the bells and whistles, which was cool. But the number two prize I didn't understand at the time, and it ended up changing my whole life. And that was that a teacher accompanied me to a local radio station to in the early morning drive time to read a part of my essay on the air. And I had never been in a radio station, and Aswan, I fell in love.
Mm.
All of that those electronics, the idea that there's a guy there in a little booth and he's talking to many people from
Yeah.
that little booth, just all those things. And in those days, radio was also a big part of young people's lives because
Right.
we didn't have streaming and
Exactly. Yeah. That's a
podcasting,
big deal. Right. Right.
all that
Completely.
stuff.
Yeah. The world's changed from back then. What was it about that moment? I mean, did you? Because as you're talking, there's a lot of points that you're making that I don't want to just brush over in regards to you knew you were in a situation that you wanted to be out of and you took action, you did something about it. All right. And that's an emphasis. I want to make sure I emphasize that to the listeners as well, especially those who run a business that's listening. If you are not liking your situation or you do not have any more any luxury of making excuses. There's things you can be doing to create revenue and make sure that there's revenue being generated in your business. All right. This is a living proof example, live proof example of why that's so very important. But also, when you get to that radio station, do you kind of walk us through that first experience? Do you see it as a way of getting your voice out there and finally being able to let loose and say, okay, this is my avenue towards wanting to be free and things like that? What kind of take us back to that specific situation if you can?
Well, it was, of course, I was 12 years old. I'm
Hmm.
maybe not very capable of, you know, mentally processing a lot of stuff.
Right.
But when you fall in love, you fall in love.
Yeah.
You almost don't have to have an explanation. And
Right.
I was captured by
Hmm.
the whole scene. And so I asked them after the little uh, on air part of it ended, as I was leaving, I asked, could I come back and just watch what you do?
Wow.
And they said no.
Mm.
And the teacher's trying to push me out the door, and I'm pushing to get them to do that. And finally, they confessed that their insurance would not allow it, which is understandable. To have a 12-year-old kid
Oh,
hanging
yeah.
around. But as we're going out the door, this receptionist stopped me and said, "I overheard your conversation, and one of our competitors right down the street has an open hall and then glass walls into the studios and into offices and everything.
Hmm.
So you can see what's going on, and there are speakers in the hall.
Mm.
So as one, I spent Saturdays for 2 years,
Hmm.
almost every Saturday, I spent hanging out in that hall
Hmm.
and watching what was going on in the control rooms, in the announcer's booth, in the marketing department, in the place where they stored all of the music,
Hmm.
and the administration of this radio station. And at 14, I'm in school. I get called out of class. That famous trip to the principal's office. So
Yeah.
I figured I was in big trouble. I was not. Uh, and uh, what they told me was that this radio station had called them and challenged them to find out who is that kid that's been hanging out in our hall on Saturdays for 2 years.
Yeah, yeah.
I never met anybody. They didn't have my name. And
Right.
what it turned out is that this radio station had gotten into a labor dispute with
Mhm.
all of their control engineers, and they fired all of them in one day.
Hmm.
And so now the DJs and the news readers had to, they call it running your board, running your own board, putting the music on, putting the commercials on, things like that,
Mhm.
which is it's very challenging to be a good on-air personality and do that. So they were desperate and looking for someone. And so they interviewed me and they asked me, do you know how to run the board? And I lied
So,
and said yes.
yes, yes, you do. Yeah, I definitely do know how to run the board. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And then the school cooperated, rescheduled my classes
Uh-huh.
so that every morning from 6 o'clock until 9 o'clock, I ran the board for that radio station Monday through
Yeah.
Friday, and that got my start in radio. The first few days were terrible, and I've always been grateful to the on-air people that were
Right.
so forgiving. I rewound tapes on the air and things like that.
Yeah.
Uh, but I learned, and
Uh-huh.
of course I loved it. I was absolutely thrilled, and I got paid for doing something I would have
That
done
you would
for
love.
free.
Right. That you were
You
doing
know,
it. You were already doing it for free. And you actually remind me talking to you is making me think of one of my favorite books, which is Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, where he talks about, you have to be good, but you have to practice at something for 10,000 hours before you actually become good at it. And you're going like in a situation where you're in high school and you're getting paid to do what you love. So you're already getting those practice hours in. What was the decision to go to college like? Like, how was that decision even? What kind of the questions were you asking yourself when it came to transitioning into maybe going to school, maybe going and working directly? What was that transition like?
well, the first transition was that the guy that I worked for in the mornings was like my dad. He drank a lot, so
Oh,
he would come in the morning with a can of beer in his hand, and he started being late. And there's a routine in the morning at a radio
yeah.
station, so I would just follow the routine. And finally, I was on the air because he was still wasn't there. And
Oh, so yeah, you got your start speaking right there. There we go. Yeah.
yes, and then we found out that that's when the general manager of the station woke up with 6:40, because
Uh-huh.
that's when the emergency phone call came. Like,
Yeah.
what in the hell are you doing on the air?
Oh, when he was
But
listening to you.
yes, so we got caught. That guy got fired,
Yeah.
and I got the job nights and weekends
Hmm.
because the audience nights and weekends were teenagers, and
Hmm.
I knew how to talk with them.
Yeah.
Uh, so I did a top 40 radio show that turned out at 17
Hmm.
in that year, which was a turning point in my life. Uh, First of all, I made more money that year than my father had ever made.
Wow.
Secondly, my father died when I was 14.
Hmm.
Uh, and my family actually moved back to West Virginia, and I ended up living with friends.
Hmm.
And I always thought I was unusual, but when you get out in the world, you find out there are a lot of people that have had rough beginnings
Yeah.
and lived with grandparents or lived with uncles or aunts, and I kind of identify with that. I was really fortunate in that the family that I lived with was loving and kind, and they actually communicated,
Right.
and they gave hugs, and
Hmm.
they expected a lot of me.
Right.
So at 17, I was now I'm famous with my classmates. I
Hmm.
get elected most likely to succeed. So
Hmm.
if you buy the yearbook for that year at Green Bay East High School,
Hmm.
I'm featured as most likely to succeed, and I made a lot of money, and I got well known.
Hmm.
I was a commencement speaker, of course,
Right.
and
At
life
17?
at 17, yes. And I called my mother we didn't live together. She moved back to the South. Um, and uh, Other people have told me that when I've told them about that phone call, they said, well, that explains everything, because I said, I'm graduating number 6 out of 300.
Mhm.
I'm most likely to succeed. And her first words out of her mouth were, why weren't you number 1? So I
Mhm.
grew up with a lot of criticism when I was around her.
Yeah.
But I spent the next,
Whew,
I went
that's
off
tough.
to
That's rough,
college.
though. I ain't gonna lie to you, man. That's right. I don't want to brush over that. And especially for you as parents that are listening in, I grew up with Caribbean parents who were tough as well. I cannot tell you how important it is that you give your child some credit when they do good. Like it's something that'll stick with you for the rest of their lives. Stick with them as kids for the rest of their lives. Give them the credit when they deserve the credit. I'm not telling you to be a pushover, but I am telling you to make sure you give them some level of confidence and recognize when things are going well for them. All right. That is so very important. It's not about being a hard ass on them every single waking moment in every single situation. That is not conducive at all to development. It's not going to help your family grow, and it's not going to help when it comes to how you help these young kids actually grow. So that I can't tell you how important it is that we make sure we make that point as well.
Brilliant, Aswin. I'll skip forward for a moment, and that is to say that, I have a best-selling book that's been a real blessing in my life, and called Living an Extraordinary Life. And when it came out, I sent copies to people that I know in the training industry,
Yeah.
about, people like Ken Blanchard and Jimmy Colano, some
Yeah.
very
Oh,
famous
yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And they bought copies they said very nice things, and they also bought copies for their family and for their companies. Uh, and then I started noticing that in those early days that people would say, but I'm disappointed about one thing in the book. And of course I would say, why? And they would say, well, it's not about you.
Hmm.
It's not about living. I don't think of myself as living an extraordinary life, but some
Right.
people do see that.
Yeah.
And they said, I thought the book would be about you. And I said, no, the book is about our work,
Yeah.
and about our graduates, and
Right.
how their issues in life connected up with the material in our trainings, and
Mhm.
the happy ending stories, of course.
Mhm.
And that's the value. I think that's why it sold well,
Mhm.
because people can identify with it. And what I didn't share for years
Mhm.
was that there is one chapter that is about me. It just doesn't say that.
Right.
And the chapter it's in the broader category, is about beliefs, what we believe, what we come to believe. And the researchers say that somewhere over 90% of our beliefs are subconscious.
Mhm.
We have beliefs about men and women, we have beliefs about money, beliefs about work, beliefs
Right.
about sport, beliefs about relationships, all kinds of things. And they function as kind of a shorthand, or like a computer program
Mhm.
running all the time in the background. And so the section was on beliefs, and there's a little chapter that says that the number one disempowering, dysfunctional belief is, I am not enough.
Yeah.
And that's what you were referring to.
Yeah.
We
Exactly.
form those, we form most of our beliefs before we're 8 years old,
Mhm.
and then they do or they don't get reinforced. But
Right.
that I am not enough belief, that's what we do to our kids.
Right.
Is that if we're constantly correcting them,
Mhm.
constantly holding them to a different standard.
Right.
You and I talked briefly about your sports background, and there are a lot of, unfortunately, there are a lot of parents that are trying to live their lives through their kids,
Yep.
and they wanted to be a player, and they weren't very good.
Mhm.
Now they want their kid to be good, and
Right.
then they pour on the criticism. So
Mhm.
anyway, that all of that happened when I was 17.
Yeah.
Really, the mold was set somewhat,
Mhm.
and I went off to college. And as when I have one semester of college, because in front of 400 fellow students for a finals test,
Mhm.
I had a heart attack.
Oh
Uh,
my God, at 18,
I was 19
uh,
at that time,
a heart attack.
and yeah, and then I had two more, one at 21 and one at 23. And
Mhm.
I was told I would not live past 35. I had daily chest pain. My life was a mess. So 10 years later, I'm having daily chest pain and think I'm going to die soon. I've gotten married and divorced, and I felt horribly guilty about it. And of course, didn't talk to anybody about that feeling of guilt.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I had this little business that was struggling. I didn't know how to attract people, the right people. And I didn't know how to motivate them, didn't know how to work with them. My life was a mess. And a friend of mine in a similar business went out to California. By that time, I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
Goes out to California and comes back a changed man from a 4-day seminar called Mind Dynamics. So he tells me I should go, and I made him wrong and said, no, I don't need that. I really did need that, but my ego wouldn't allow me to tell the truth.
Right.
And so for 6 months, I watched him. I watched his business get better. He had a facial skin condition called adult onset acne that made his face a mess. And it cleared up. His face cleared up.
His face cleared
and
up. Right.
And I was aware he was close to divorce, and suddenly his relationship is close and intimate and wonderful. And so finally, I did go to that seminar, and as one, it's a cliche all these years later, but 4 days later, my whole life changed. I mean, not everything on that day, but it started a process that has changed my entire life because the main thing that happened was I realized I need to take responsibility for my life, all of it, good, bad, indifferent. I needed to own it. It wasn't my drunk father. It wasn't my violent mother. It wasn't how the world treated me. It certainly wasn't my former wife. That I was the source of all of that. And not from a standpoint of blame or guilt, but from a standpoint of simply accepting it, owning it, and realizing I needed to do some work on me.
Right.
That following year, my little business tripled in size. The year after that, it went up 10 times. And I sent a lot of people to the Mind Dynamics training. I didn't understand it. I didn't really know anything about it. I just knew that it was good for me. And that when I sent my friends originally and my family, and then my salespeople, particularly my staff, my life got better. So it was actually it was selfish, but it just like with me, for many of them, it really changed their life for the better. And one day I got a phone call from the founder of that company. I didn't even know his name. He introduced himself and said thank you. I had put 400 people in his training over the couple of years.
Yeah, because you were sending people. Right.
Just because I was excited about it, and it was good for me. And he invited me to come and meet him in California. By then I had sold my business and was working as a sales trainer in New York City. So I got to fly first class across the country, my first class trip, to meet this wonderful man, Alexander Everett. And 10 days later, I was president of Mind Dynamics.
Mind Dynamics was, just so we're clear though, Mind Dynamics, that was the seminar in which you actually went to, and then you became the president of that actual seminar that ultimately, basically, you just said changed your life.
Exactly. And I just ran the business of the business. Alexander handled the content, handled training of the trainers, the whole soft side of the business he handled. And I did the work of kind of straightening out some things and getting people moving. And so we were quite successful. The first 2 years, I worked only in the US, but in the second 2 years there, I ran around the world setting up foreign subsidiaries of Mind Dynamics. And this is a kid from Green Bay, Wisconsin, without a college education, but a love for the work. I loved the work, and it came kind of naturally to me. And for a young guy, in my case, early 30s, the chance to travel around the world, experience different cultures, make mistakes with a very gentle and very allowing boss, Alexander, So that was all good. And then the co-founder of that company died in a plane crash. Alexander sold his shares to the estate of his late partner, who died without a will.
Oh my God.
Uh, Very wealthy guy with over 30 companies that he owned, all or big part of, and no will. So it was a mess. So
Mhm.
I ended up working for a probate judge, which
Mhm.
didn't work for me,
Right. Well,
to put it.
once you experience what you just experienced, it becomes like I like to call it psychologically unemployable because first of all, it's something you believe in, and then you were able to go out and sell it. And sales is a force multiplier. You know, when you learn to sell something, first of all, you know what you're good at, you know what you can believe in, and you're very straightforward and you're very much in a situation where you know exactly what you want. It's gonna be hard to go back and work for someone when you know how to sell, what you can be selling during those times. And similar to you, Robert, I actually went to a Tony Robbins event about 5 years ago now. It's Unleash the Power Within. And like you, my life changed after that moment. After that moment, this podcast, 5 books later, tons of material out there. If you look my name up before that event, you look it up now, it's like two completely different people. And one of the things that really stuck. I mean, there's times we'd probably be on here for hours if I was to try to tell you everything that stuck out. But one of the main things was when Tony Robbins had explained that life is happening for you and not to you. When it comes to what you experienced at that event, even though that now the company has been sold and you kind of moved on from it and you actually retire, if I'm not mistaken, you said retired at age 46. What can you say kind of as you look back now was the thing that really hooked you and made it so you just focused and was able to, really produce the numbers that you were able to produce and then create the lifestyle that you ultimately were able to create?
Well, when I left Mindedemics,
Mm-hmm.
I founded a company called LifeSpring,
Mm-hmm.
and so back to being an entrepreneur. And several people from Mindedemics joined me, and pretty soon we had trainings going in San Francisco, in Chicago, and in Portland, Oregon, and uh, uh, and I quit. I
And what
quit my own company.
you quit. Yeah, all right, perfect. Yeah, this is actually a great point too, because when you are an entrepreneur, you do have to know when to fire yourself. You do have to know when it's time to
Yes.
let folks run the business the way it needs to be run. You can't be building it and expect to be the person, the face of it, and do everything. You have to have it in your mind when it's going to be time for you to move on. So yeah, please, yeah, go ahead, share.
Well, we could do an entire program
Yes, we
as
did.
one, and maybe we should, on
Mm-hmm.
what I learned from that, because what I learned from that is what I do now. But what I realized is that when I worked for Mindedemics, there was a part of running the business that I was unaware of. You know, the Buddhists have this, the Zen Buddhists have this expression that fish don't describe water very well. Whatever you're living in,
Mm-hmm.
you think that's reality, but
Mm-hmm.
quite often you see very little of reality.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality that I didn't see was that there was something called the organization's purpose, its vision, and its values
Mm-hmm.
that I took for granted because Alexander handled all of that without talking about it.
Uh,
He was the example of
yeah,
living a life of purpose, of vision, and values.
yeah,
And I enjoyed that, and everybody in Mindedemics enjoyed it. It's why we grew so rapidly.
yeah,
And so when I started LifeSpring, I made an assumption that it would be the same, and it wasn't.
yeah.
And I found out my early hires, my partners, in effect,
Mm-hmm.
were not aligned with me around purpose, vision, and values. And that made everything miserable.
Right.
It just didn't work. It didn't work. I mean, we grew in revenue and profit, but it didn't feel good. So I quit. I sold the company to my staff for nothing down and forever to pay. And I had put every penny that I had into that company. I self-funded it. And so now I'm broke. I've got children to take care of. I've got a mortgage. I've got life.
Yeah.
And I'm broke and I'm unemployable,
Yeah.
perhaps.
Eventually, you've already sold what you can sell, but now you don't have it in liquid. So Now it's like, you gotta gotta figure something out, man. Every single entrepreneur, listen, if you are really wanting to be in business for yourself, these times are gonna come. These times are gonna come. This is why I have this show. This is why I bring the people I bring on this show. These times will come. Do not quit. All right, we're here talking you through it. I've lost everything, just like, I mean, car repossessed everything. I know the feeling, but it's a matter of you cannot quit. You cannot quit. You cannot quit.
Well, and you can, even though I was kind of unconscious about it, what you can do is to take a look and do a self inventory and do something that you're good at.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was good at was I love these trainings. And I had, and by the way, by that time I had gone through the Mind Dynamics trainer course. I started to understand the work, not
Yeah.
just its impact, but how to make that impact work.
Right.
And during that period, when I was running around the world setting up these companies, I said no to one country, and that was Japan. And now they found out that I had sold LifeSpring.
Mm-hmm.
So they contacted me and they offered me the opportunity to come to Japan for 3 months, and they would pay me for 1 year.
Wow.
In effect, I'd do a data dump
Yeah.
and teach them how to do this thing and then leave, and they do the rest. But they would keep paying me, and it sounded like a good idea to me as one.
Right. Sounds like a good idea to me too.
So I went to Japan for 3 months, and I ended up staying the first time for 12 years. So I built a company called ARC International. We had
Wait a minute.
15.
So you go for 3 months and you ended up staying there for 12 years. Is
Yeah,
that correctly?
I still do not teach planning. I'm an opportunist. I jump at opportunity. And I mean, we struggled in the early days. I slept on somebody's couch for 8 months. I had to send my children back to the U.S. It was tough,
Right.
but we ended up with 15 training centers in 7 countries. We became the largest training organization in Asia, 240 full-time people, another 50 or 60 contract trainers, and hugely successful, which
Now,
led
what was the
to
role of these trainers? What was their
uh,
day-to-day?
a series of programs that kind of started with the Mind Dynamics idea, but then extended it to being a higher impact for leaders. Leaders in your family, leaders in your companies, leaders in your communities, and so we had a full curriculum for that.
Okay.
So that led to those 2 companies, LifeSpring and ARC, have graduated over 1,300,000 people, and so that's my main claim to fame is I finally made all that work,
Right.
and that led to the falling in love.
That's
And
gonna happen every once in a while.
that can happen, and it happened to me. And I moved back to the U.S. with my new wife and semi-retired to Aspen, Colorado. I built a 14,500 square foot home on 76 acres just outside of Aspen.
Wow.
I skied 80 days a year. I traveled with the late John Denver, and was on 6 nonprofit boards. And I had 2 more children, birth children, and 2 adopted children, special needs kids. So I was busy and disconnected from my business, but I had an incredible experience for 12 years in Aspen, and lost control of my company. So I lost $30 million, and the love of my life left me for a lawyer. So it knocked me on my butt.
Yeah, I'm trying to, and hopefully I'm not bringing back too many bad memories when I ask this, but when it comes to, because I just turned 35, right? And for you to have retired at 46, that means you were around my age when you got this opportunity in Japan. You built it, and then you come back, pretty much retired. You have all the money, you have everything pretty much set. And then, basically what I'm hearing is now it just comes crashing down.
Everything crashed.
Man.
The
Yeah, you've
top
been through it. Yeah, that's crazy.
the guy that I had delegated to my Asian business and the guy that I had delegated to run. By that time, I had a U.S. Corporate change business,
Hmm.
and they both left the company the same week, and taking all of my top people with them. So, and then I stepped back into the company, attempting to rescue it, which just cost me a lot of money
Mhm.
and time and energy. And during that period, my wife and the lawyer went off to do what they wanted to do with their
Jesus.
lives and my money.
Jesus.
So it was a tough time. So I went back to work. I wrote the book that I mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
and that's turned out very well. I work with other people like me. It's surprising how similar my story is with the people that I work. I work with business owners primarily,
Mhm.
and on how to bring their teams together or, with a foundation of
Right.
knowing their purpose, knowing their vision, knowing their values, and being aligned and focused and committed
Hmm.
to all of that. So building a foundation, you
Right.
know, all of my clients know more about their business than I do.
Hmm.
But I, in a macro level, I know I do know a lot about how to bring people together around a common vision,
Hmm.
and then get them to perform. So that's what I do, and so it's all worked out. From all of
But walk
that
us
failure,
through, like, yes,
I
I'm
learned.
walk us through that like, how were you, because there's tons of people I know that would be completely shut down after that. Please just kind of walk us through how you were able to get yourself in the right state of mind to now you can go out and serve business owners and ultimately just bounce back and ultimately just end up like, look, you're doing great things now. You're able to speak to these business owners, whether it's through the book, whether it's through your workshops. What were you able to do? Like, how were you able to pick yourself up sort of and develop a mindset in which you're like, look, that's the past. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm moving forward to the future.
Well, that's another 3 day seminar, as one. But I think what I would say is that
Yeah.
is I like to teach through stories. So
Yeah.
here's a true story. I had a videotape of an interview. I was interviewed by a charity that I
Hmm.
supported called Grassroots Aspen. And what they do, they still do this. They bring 30 to 50 inner city kids to Aspen and have them have a 2 week experience in the richest town in America.
Yeah.
And so they get to stay in some beautiful homes. They get some wonderful bike rides. They have some wonderful. They learn rugby maybe for
Yeah.
the first
Just seeing
time.
life. Right. Right. Yeah. We actually, because I live in West Palm Beach, Florida now, we do something similar with some kids from the inner city, just getting them to see something new, fresh,
Yep.
fresh cut grass, just something new that might spark something in their young mind to say, hey, I do have opportunities and there are things I can be doing.
I could talk about grassroots. I can tell with you forever, but
Mm-hmm.
I this woman wanted to interview me. They have grassroots television,
Mm-hmm.
and the local public television outlet, and so she interviewed me, and that went on to a beta tape, a Sony beta tape.
Mm-hmm.
So a few years ago, I converted, like many people do, about 4,000 still photos and all of my videotapes to digital. You send it off to some company and they do that for you.
For those
Well,
of
to
you
do
young
that,
listeners, VHS, they just asked your grandparents what a VHS tape was. And to see,
yes,
yeah, those
exactly,
things actually did exist.
or a rotary dial telephone.
Yeah, bro, oh my
Uh,
God, yeah, that was really taking it back there.
so I watched this video before I sent it off to this company,
Hmm.
and I was still struggling with recovery, which is what you're talking about. The
Hmm.
recovery in terms of money, in terms of reputation, in
Yeah.
terms of how I felt about me, because I realized I'm accountable.
Yes.
I did this. And so I watched this tape, this interview, and as one, it was a life changing experience for me
Hmm.
because every word I said was perfect,
Hmm.
but the energy was horrible.
Hmm.
And it was like therapy for me
Hmm.
because I thought this is what happened to me, and this is how I processed it, and I don't like that person. And it was me. I don't like the person that showed up about something I cared about, the work of grassroots.
Mm-hmm.
I really cared about it, and yet I sounded like I was talking about a funeral.
Yeah.
And I was, in a way, and it was the funeral for the old me.
Mm-hmm.
That's also by the time that I did some work with a coach
Mm-hmm.
around my purpose.
Yeah.
And I shifted my purpose from "I'll never be poor again" to that my life is a contribution.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, and that's another long story, but just watching that video and realizing what had happened to me as a result of the betrayal, as a result of the dishonesty and the violation of me in every way,
Yeah.
the way I processed it didn't work.
Yeah.
I needed to, and what I needed to do was get back to my purpose,
Yeah.
get back to my vision and my values, so that's the process. When
Yeah.
life knocks you down, the Japanese saying is, uh, 9 times knocked down, 10 times up,
Yeah.
and but everybody experiences breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't say everybody, most people do.
Right.
And so the question is, when that happens, you got to go back to the essential you, and especially anything that brought you success in the past
Mm-hmm.
can be accessed for success in the future.
Yes.
Like in your example, where you have a background in sports, there's some learning that I can tell you've got some awareness
Right.
now of how you learned from coaches, how you learned from systems,
Yeah.
how you learned a certain value set that brought success. And you also probably noticed a few people around you that didn't get with the program.
Exactly.
They might have had a lot of physical talent, or uh, uh, they might have had a lot of benefits,
Mm-hmm.
but they weren't able to pull it together and realize what it takes to be successful. So
Right.
that's been what a lot of my life is about, and that's what
Mm-hmm.
I share with my clients.
Yeah, well, you actually beat me too, because I do want to be very respectful of your time. And this is something I've said on multiple occasions is you got to hire a coach. All right. Whether business owners, employees, whatever, it's so important that you hire a coach and you get around people that know what you don't know. You do not know what you don't know. And the people that have been through it can help you get there. So, with that, I want to give you the opportunity a little bit to speak on the type of people that you serve, the type of business owners that you do serve. What's the journey that you take them on, and what is your business all about now, and what can we expect to see coming down the pipeline?
Uh, I realize, and I didn't plan this as one. It's what happened, but I
Mm-hmm.
can look back and see that it really had a lot to do with my current success. And that is, I have two kinds of clients. One kind are the people in trouble. They're losing key people. They are losing market share. They are not profitable, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they're miserable, and they're staying up late, and they're playing online poker at 2 a.m. and
Yeah.
or surfing the web, and they're
Right.
drinking or using drugs. And again, I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
I went through that.
Yeah.
So people in trouble, that's my first group of clients. My bigger group are people that are doing pretty well. And what they're looking for is, first of all, they're looking for more personal time.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they're looking for more ease, for more peace of mind.
Mm-hmm.
Running their company, uh, their limitations are starting to show up a little bit, and particularly in the team around them.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly, Harvard Business School study says uh, that small and medium-sized business people generally spend 80% of their time on people problems. People,
That's a fact.
people's drama being brought to them. So what I do with either of those groups of people is the same thing. Is I bring the team together,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm capable of truth telling
Mm-hmm.
with the team. Most owners have trouble with that because they got to work with these people every day. And, they're either trying to be nice to them, or they're trying to mirror their father, or son, they don't know how to lead, really. They don't know how to hire. They don't know what
Yeah.
filters they should look through in hiring.
Yeah.
They don't know how to run a good meeting, a
Mhm.
productive meeting. So things like that. So we do 4 or 5 days together in a very intensive environment where we get the team to agree on a purpose,
Mhm.
vision, values, and strategic intent for the company. And there's a lot of truth telling. And it is not unusual for somebody to quit the company in the middle of our training
Yeah.
because they get clear that it's not for them.
Yeah.
Uh,
And that's the way it
but the
should be,
more,
to be honest with you. You don't want to waste people's time. Our time
yeah,
is not unlimited. That is the way it should be. There's nothing wrong with that. No one's going to think any less of you if it's time for you to move on. That is the way it should be. Do not waste people's time, because ultimately you're just wasting your own time and you're creating more problems.
something got developed in LifeSpring after I sold the company
Mhm.
that I learned about later. I stayed in touch with those people. They were all my former staff,
Mhm.
and so I bought a ranch next door to the new owner's ranch. So
Right.
I mean, there were a lot of connections. And one of the things they did that I hadn't done as successfully as they did was the crucial people in the company, and maybe you can see this from your sports background.
Mhm.
The really important people in the company held each other accountable.
Yeah.
The boss did not have to do it.
Yeah.
And I've heard this a lot, that what happens in the locker room is
Stay
just
on the
as
line. Right.
important as what happens on the field.
Yeah.
And the people in LifeSpring that I actually, many of them ended up quitting LifeSpring and coming to work for me.
Mhm.
And what I learned that they had learned
Yeah.
was how to hold each other accountable.
Exactly.
And so that's one of the things we work on in our trainings and in our follow-up work and coaching with people, is how to hold each other accountable instead of it being top down. Most owners take on way too much. They work so hard, they work so many hours. Most of them are smart, they're focused,
Right.
they're ambitious. So what we want to do is to free them up to be the creative people that they are,
Yeah.
and to get those people that report to them,
Mhm.
especially the top team, to be like little owners within the company,
Yeah.
whether they have ownership or not.
Mhm.
So that's incredibly rewarding work. It's
Mhm.
fun. We laugh a lot. We cry a little, and we let the past go. We tell the truth about current reality, and we choose a new vision that's freely chosen and that empowers people and makes it the kind of place that people want to work.
Yes.
They can't wait to go to work.
Right.
And my experience with owners is that they want one thing that's kind of impossible, but it's true. And as they want people to be as passionately committed to their company as they are.
They are.
You know,
And
the
some of
truth
them
about that
expect
is,
that. Yeah, they expect that, and they are mistaken. Very
it's
much
a, it,
mistaken. Yes.
it's an unrealistic expectation.
Mhm.
However, if you work on these foundational principles,
Mhm.
what you do is you get people that really understand that
Mhm.
where they are, the opportunity that they have to
Right.
build something together. There's nothing like building something. Again, that sports metaphor.
Mhm.
When you do something together, you set a goal and you accomplish it together, the
Mhm.
trust that gets built, the relationships that get built, it's
Right.
like nothing else on the planet that I know of for
Exactly.
bringing joy and happiness and money.
Mhm.
Uh, the way to do it is to come together, trust each other, tell the truth rigorously, and be about your work.
Yeah.
So that's my goal.
So, what is the best way for people to reach out if they're interested in talking to you, or becoming a client and stuff like that? Where do you send people?
Well, everything starts with a relationship.
Mhm.
And my way of doing that is I have a free weekly newsletter called An Extraordinary Minute. I've been doing it for 15 years.
Huh.
And
How
it's
often does it
it's
come
an
out?
idea once a week, every Wednesday morning for
15 years.
15
Once again,
years.
you go.
It's free,
Uh-huh.
and it's the structure is it's an idea. It's something that I've heard from someone else, or
Yeah.
a video that I watched, a seminar that I've attended,
Mhm.
something that I've read, and then my comments on it, all designed to be read in 1 minute or less.
Mhm.
And but it opens up something, an idea for people. And
Right.
then if they want to explore it further, they can do that with me or with Tony Robbins or with someone else. But uh, I do that. And I've also written and rewritten and edited and rewritten a 28-page PDF that I offer to people free
Mhm.
about success. And it gives you a chance to learn what I've learned over the years. And it's also shareable. It's not protected except by copyright.
Right.
But you can share it with your team, you can share it with your family, and that comes along with the registration for the weekly event. So that's at extraordinarypeople.com
Okay.
uh, on the web, extraordinarypeople.com. And you can navigate around and find out stuff about what I'm up to and how I think. And,
Mhm.
if you receive that weekly email and want to connect up with me, all you have to do is hit reply. I I answer every email, well, not everyone, but most of them,
Mhm.
and set up a phone call and we'll chat.
Right.
So
And
that's where I am.
we'll make sure we include all that in the show notes as well. So if you're driving, don't feel like you got to stop and write it down. As all you're gonna have to do is just click the link and it'll take you wherever you need to take or wherever you need to go. So all that being said, Robert, the way I close out all the shows is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. You are back in Wisconsin, you're shoveling snow, you have your paper route, you're doing everything, you're selling, you finally found your radio gig. There's all sorts of things you're doing. Pretend that young 14-year-old kid has come into the Zoom room. Give him some words of encouragement and we'll officially close.
I think the biggest empowering belief that I know of is that whether you ascribe this to God or to the stars or the moon or the day you were born or the lines on your hand, there's a lot of different systems for thinking. But I strongly believe we were all put here for a specific purpose, and realizing what that purpose is for your life is the journey that pays the highest benefits.
Mhm.
You know, the kid that goes out and shoots baskets for 3 hours and it's dark. Listen to that voice inside that's motivating that.
Mhm.
The kid that reads their way. I had a knee disease that caused me to be in a full leg cast for 3 of 4 summers as a teenager. I read my way through the biographies section at the local public library,
Mhm.
biographies of famous people and how they accomplished it. Uh,
Right.
but right away, and then later in working with my friend John Denver, he once said that he said, "I don't know if you've thought about it, Robert, but everything for you revolves around your voice. The
Mhm.
early days in radio, the training, the just everything.
Mhm.
It all revolved around using my voice.
Right.
So figure out what your strength is, your core competence, the thing that you're naturally drawn to and that you're good at, and leverage it like crazy. Uh, you know, uh, Look, I have a friend, a dear friend, and he happens to be divorced. He had a daughter who I'm going to guess at that time was 11 or 12 years old.
Mhm.
And he's complaining to me that she's very committed to gymnastics. And she was number 2 in the state of Colorado at that time in her age group. But it's expensive. The lessons with the Russian trainers, the little costumes they wear are so expensive. And
Yeah,
then there are
it is.
trips all over the place, trips to compete. And
Mhm.
so he's complaining about the cost and how he thinks his ex-wife should pay more, blah, blah, blah. And by the way, she's spending 4 hours a day in gymnastics. So she has this crazy school schedule. She's only in school 3.5 hours a day. And
Mhm.
I worry about her future. They're running that racket on. And what I said to him that had an impact was I said, his name is Massimo. I said, Mas, what she's learning in gymnastics about goal setting, about commitment, about getting through pain,
Mhm.
about working with others, about taking coaching, I promise you that's more valuable than anything she could learn in school.
Yes.
Well, she's a National Merit Scholar today.
Mhm.
She tore up her knee and had to stop competitive gymnastics.
Right.
Uh, she's now a coach part time,
Mhm.
you know, in her senior year of high school.
Right.
Wonderful young woman.
Mhm.
And she knows how to set goals. She knows how to work with others. She knows
Exactly.
how to take coaching. She knows about discipline. She knows about nutrition. She
Mhm.
knows about getting enough sleep. You know,
Exactly.
all those
Exactly.
things you know from your career.
Exactly. Exactly.
Uh, and so I would say, uh, if you're that younger person,
Mhm.
realize that you're here for a purpose,
Yeah.
that God intended for you to accomplish something,
Right.
and that your job is to find out what that is, to try things, to take action, that get off of your phone, get off of video games,
Mhm.
get off of goofing around, go find out where your talent is
Yeah.
and start using it.
Right. And it's a phrase for you regular listeners that you've heard on multiple occasions on the show. If it's your first time tuning in, just get used to hearing that the two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day that you figure out why. All right. So figure out that why. There's no date to it. There's no, just simply figure out why. So all that being
Yep.
said, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.